September of 2010, Nickelodeon premiered a film that was, for lack of a better word, controversial. It wasn't received well at the time because it was simply too much for viewers to handle.
Fuck this movie.
Over the years, though, time has been kind to this film, and has since been rightly regarded as a Gen Z cult classic. I am of course talking about Lucas Cruikshank and Clay Wiener's quintessential American masterpiece, Fred the Movie. Now, Fred the Movie is not an easy film, neither to view or discuss. Many have blamed the film for the rise of the alt-right.
Oh my gosh, can you fuck off and kill yourself?
The Black Pill movement, Gamergate, 4chan, Joe Rogan's podcast, and other horrific crimes. But is it really that easy to blame the film? Should straight white men have looked to Fred Figglehorn as a role model? What really lies beneath the comedic exterior here? Join me as we dissect what is, in my mind, the most depressing film ever made. Fred is the ultimate portrayal of white male fragility. He is stricken with delusion and feelings of betrayal. His mother is a promiscuous crack addict.
That's good. That's real good.
And he lacks a true father figure in his life, often having hallucinations of his dad being wrestled at John Cena. The beginning of the film sets the stage of Fred's signs of schizophrenic psychosis, which is a narrative element that is rampant throughout. One of our earliest scenes with the titular protagonist is him stalking a woman he believes is his girlfriend, Judy, of which he has frequent delusions of their relationship, and having an exceptional vocal talent.
Somebody call 911! Shorty fire burning on the dance floor! Whoa!
Fred, in many respects, could be considered the original incel. His stalker behavior and frequent delusions of grandeur, despite lacking the effort and drive to achieve any of this. His obsession for Judy appears to stem from physical infatuation with her, rather than respect for her as a human being.
I never have seen Judy's back door, but I bet it's really nice.
After Judy moves away, Fred goes through a severe mental breakdown and chronic depression, prompting him to go stalk her again to see where she now resides. Fred feels a sense of entitlement to Judy, to the point where she can't even move away without Fred's consent. Not only that, Fred is shown to be pretty racist on more than one occasion, from assuming seeing Asian children means
Oh my damn, I dug all the way to China!
to calling a Latino man a spaceman.
Get away from me, spaceman! I will not let you ruin my brain!
Fred can be seen as the precursor to Nicholas J. Fuentes, minus sucking off Destiny. Now, upon watching the film, most viewers come to the conclusion that there is something wrong with Fred. But the film never gives us any explicit answers. Rather, we have to do some research for ourselves. What do we know about Fred's personal history? Well, the film doesn't explicitly tell us. There's a lot of mysterious things in this film that are up to the viewer's interpretation, but we can use some external sources to figure out why he maybe is this way. Let's look at one of the more unexplained characters in the film, Fred's mom, who is not given a name. According to her family history, she met Fred's dad in 1992 when she was in 9th grade. They started to fall in love shortly after graduating high school. They married in June of 1995. And after that, Fred's father apparently became a successful musician. And in September of 2002, Fred's mother announced that she was pregnant with Fred. But Fred's father did not like this news, as he never wanted to have a child, leaving him to divorce Fred's mom. After this, it is said that Fred's mom fell into a deep depression and started drinking heavily. Now, it never says the details explicitly, but it is heavily implied that Fred's mom heavily drank while pregnant with Fred. It is also stated that she became alcoholic later in life, leaving her to be very neglectful when taking care of Fred. And with no strong father figure and a neglectful mother, childhood was not easy for Fred. The neglective nature of his mother often left him to be taken care of under his grandmother, who was supposedly abusive and allegedly would lock him in a cage. Things also never got easier for Fred's father, as he was caught driving below the speed limit and was sent to the Eastern State Penitentiary on death row. Now, the film never explicitly states who Fred's father is. There's a scene near the end of the film where Fred's mother implies that the man on the toilet on Google Maps could potentially be his dad. However, this scene is up to interpretation to the viewer.
That was about, 15 years ago? I'm 15. I'm taking a nap.
The only scenes we get of Fred having an actual father figure is his delusions of John Cena. In the film, John Cena gives Fred advice that he's always wanted to hear from an actual father. He motivates Fred into standing up for himself and not being scared of Kevin.
You gotta look at yourself and say, my time is now!
He motivates him on his quest to stalk Judy, and convinces Fred that he has to do this for the greater good, that something horrible might have happened to Judy. John Cena as Fred's dad may look like he gives good advice, he may look like he's got everything figured out, but at the end of the day, this is all in Fred's head, and this idea of a father figure only exists to validate Fred's problematic behavior, to justify his stalking of his love interest. It's all an illusion, just like many other scenes in the film.
Since I met my friend, the deer.
That's me.
Fred is also inflicted by childhood trauma, often calling back to a terrifying incident when Fred was a little boy, playing ball with his friend, little Evan Weiss, who then got lost in the woods trying to find the ball, causing Fred to urinate in his pants. During his journey, he actually comes across little Evan Weiss, who appears to still be alive, but greets Fred in a very Lynchian manner.
Fred! It's me! Evan Weiss! I got it! The ball! I got the ball! I got it!
Indeed, in Fred the movie, it is quite hard to tell what is reality and what is all in Fred's head. Yes, Fred the movie makes use of the unreliable narrator trope, and I think that Fred Figglehorn is one of the great modern examples of this very famous archetype. We see this trope done in many other films such as David Fincher's Fight Club, or Mary Harron's American Psycho, or more recently Todd Phillips' Joker, or even in literature such as J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, or Anthony Burgess' A Clockwork Orange. Even the films I've listed are based on some sort of novel or comic book. Fred the movie, however, is not based on any existing novel or literary piece of work. Rather, it is based on a web series on YouTube, and it is the first of its kind in that aspect. I mention the web series as I think it is important to watch if we want to understand Fred the movie, its characters, and the backstory of the protagonist. Many details of Fred the web series were not fully adapted into the feature film, as studio executives thought the film was controversial enough, even without all these explicit details. Therefore, details such as Fred's alleged abusive childhood was cut down and only implied for the film. While beginning his journey, Fred comes across a young man on the bus, who shows up quite a few times throughout the film.
Fred Figglehorn.
Derf.
Derf is an extension of everything Fred wants to be. He wants to be himself, not conform to societal standards.
I guess I'm a little weird.
Everybody's weird, man. All of us.
But unlike Derf, he is a small, insecure little boy, and scared. He, unlike Derf, cannot truly be free, because he refuses to let go.
All the ways you wish you could be, that's me. I look like you want to look, I fuck like you want to fuck, I am smart, capable, and most importantly, I'm free in all the ways that you are not.
Fred's journey is filled with many obstacles, including a very disturbing sequence in which he terrorizes a pet store after attempting to steal one of the Pomeranians, which he mistakes as a squirrel.
It's not a dog!
Spray him, he's got crazy in his eyes! Stop.
Leave Put the dog back.
Put the dog back! What the
Now, while there are many iconic scenes in the middle which we can go over and dissect, we'll have to save that for later. But here's where we get into heavy spoilers. The film ends with Fred throwing a party with his next-door neighbor Bertha. He produces a chaotic video of the event and shares it around the school,
This party be off the hook!
causing his popularity to skyrocket and causing him to finally have a chance with Judy. And then the film ends. If Joker was a response to the Reagan era, Fred the movie was a precursor to the Trump era. Director Clay Weiner was, for lack of a better word, a prophet. He foresaw what was to come. He saw through the cracks of the Obama administration, built on the promises of hope, and realized what the next chapter for America was. This is explored even further within the character of Kevin. Kevin detests Fred because he sees himself in him. He is Fred. In many ways, Fred and Kevin are both victims of toxic masculinity. Both are stricken by the impossible standards of men, which is expressed by their problematic behavior.
Oh, it looks like you got my message that you're not invited to my party! Sucker!
But is it their fault, or is it the oppressive boot of capitalism ready to stomp them down at any moment, or the soulless void of American suburbia, or the opioid epidemic? Now, earlier in this video, I compared Fred to that of the modern incel, but in reality, both Fred and Kevin can be considered prophetic in their depictions of the modern American male. While the film was released in 2010, many of these characterizations feel eerily similar in the modern age. Fred and Kevin are both sides of the same coin, but they represent a different subsection of men. Kevin is very much an early satire on the average manosphere consumer, over a decade before the manosphere became mainstream. Much of his resentment for Fred comes not only from their similarities, but their fight for Judy's attention. He, also like Fred, views Judy as someone to be objectified rather than respected, and frequently engages in toxic behavior such as bullying Fred in attempts to try to impress those around him, even Judy, even when she is clearly not interested in him or his antics.
Just leave him alone!
No.
Fred represents an even deeper, darker rabbit hole. Fred does not seem similar to those who consume modern red pill content, rather one who consumes black pill content. An ideology which goes even further than that of the red pill, often into more dangerous, darker territory, explained by his mental instability. When we look at a Kevin scene, we very much feel reminded of the modern manosphere movement. We are reminded of familiar faces such as Andrew Tate,
Slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up bitch, sex.
or Fresh and Fit.
Guys have to have certain things in place, right, before they want to get into a long-term relationship. It's 5 things. So I would say 100K per year, 6 figures a year, 6 months to 1 year of savings, be in good shape, have at least 50 partners, right, sexual body count.
The ideology, often expressed by these controversial figures, have successfully worn off on a generation of men, emulating behavior that feels eerily reminiscent of Kevin. Now, whereas red pill influencers are more likely to find success and heavily market themselves, the Fred ideology, one reminiscent of the black pill ideology, is much more niche, which to its supporters and those that follow it give it a sense of rawness. The lack of corporatization of this movement gives it a sense of relatability, despite how outlandish its claims may feel, which is why there is not a specific black pill influencer to point to. There is not necessarily a hero among the black pill community as much as a subset of ideologies that are repeated by those who espouse it. However, it's not entirely fair to describe Fred as a black-pilled character, as this film came out way before incel was a commonly used term. In fact, the very plot of the film denounces Fred as a black-pilled individual, as his purpose seems to be trying to find love, whereas the black pill is an inherently nihilistic ideology, one where men utterly denounce the idea of ever finding love, or the hope that it may happen. Therefore, Fred, in the modern era, could not be considered red pill or black pill, but he could be considered somewhere in the middle, something like a grey pill. While he lacks the traditionally aggressively macho attitude of the red pill movement, he also does not abide by the mere hopelessness of the black pill movement. However, he does express some factors of this. The Black Pill movement is often defined by endorsing violence against women, or men that happen to have success with women. Now, while Fred never expresses any sort of desire to commit violence towards women, he actively expresses violent thoughts towards Kevin.
I bet God pushed him down because he hates the way he sings.
And in many instances, full-on violent daydreams.
You want the ball? Watch out! Are you gonna cry? Oh, this baby Kevin!
As he perceives Kevin as someone who has luck with women, and therefore one who will have luck with Judy. But as we see from Kevin's perspective, or what we can see, he also does not have success with women. Rather, puts on a persona of doing so.
It doesn't even matter because 5 girls already signed it, so...
Why'd they all use the same pen?
Because girls like the color red.
These two characters perfectly represent the difference between these ideologies. Kevin is merely at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this ideology, meaning he still feels he has somewhat of a reputation to save. He finds many ways to mask his insecurities, and is a habitual liar. He doesn't want to seem emasculated in any sort of situation. Fred, however, while as we've established is not a nihilistic character, doesn't necessarily try to hide who he is. He may not like who he is most of the time. He may come up with cooler ideals for himself up in his head, but he does not feel the need to hide who he is. In this sense, it's truly hard to tell who is the more tragic character. While we definitely know more about Fred's traumatizing backstory, as the film is told from his perspective, there is a part of Fred who feels more liberated than Kevin. Everything about Kevin feels performative. Sure, Fred still struggles with being comfortable with himself, but not to the extent Kevin does. Really, it's what we don't know about Kevin that makes his character even more tragic than Fred's. While we lack any deep knowledge on Fred's personal family history, we lack even more on Kevin, but they seem to both come from dysfunctional families, as expressed in this scene where it is heavily implied that Kevin's mom is having an affair, which Kevin is aware of.
Kevin, no, I am drawing the line.
I'm gonna tell Dad!
Don't tell him.
In fact, the context of this scene is Kevin attempting to blackmail his mother, just so she can drive back so Kevin can harass Fred again, implying a real emotional void in Kevin where he doesn't seem to care about his parents' situation, rather using it as an opportunity verbally attack somebody he claims to despise. It seems as though Fred is the most important thing in his life, as if Fred is the only one who can truly understand him, a feeling Kevin does not like deep inside, regurgitating into anger and violence.
I don't care that I wasn't invited to Fred's party.
I don't care at all. I don't.
If we take a look at the standoff scene between Kevin and Fred, we can see their chemistry on display. Again, we see Kevin's traditional performative masculinity on display here. Fred comes out of the house and declares he's going to meet up with Judy. These highly inappropriate noises made by Kevin seem to be representative of that of a mating call. By devolving Kevin into that of a bumbling buffoon, this scene brilliantly satirizes toxic masculinity. It's almost like the film is portraying these characters as their primitive ancestors, nearly ape-like in their infatuation with Judy. Within these two characters, Fred the movie works as the ultimate critique of American culture as a whole, the darkness of what is beneath middle-class American values, and what it all amounts to. Nothing. Now, there is one character in the film which we have not discussed that thoroughly: Judy, Fred's love interest, the driving point of the film. And the reason for that is, we don't really get to see much of Judy's side of the story. Most of the film focuses on the toxic men, such as Fred and Kevin, and we only really get to see Judy through their perspective. However, I feel this was intentional on the filmmaker's part. As I mentioned before, Fred sees Judy as sort of an object. His obsession with her stems through physical infatuation, rather than that of respect. By not giving us a glimpse of Judy's personal life, we get to see Judy the way Fred sees Judy. The entire film, in essence, puts you in Fred's shoes, and you can feel what he's feeling, even if it makes you feel dirty or a little uncomfortable, but the feelings you feel are his. You somewhat sympathize with Fred. The film breaks the fourth wall multiple times. A clear reference to the Fred YouTube series where he would talk to his viewers, but he does this even when there isn't implied to be a camera in front of him. He seems to just be talking to nobody in particular, which further emphasizes his mental decline throughout the film. Now, getting back to Judy as a character, what exactly happens to Judy? Well, it is implied that the relationship between Fred and Judy did not last very long. It is also stated that after the events of the first film, she briefly dated Kevin, which also did not last very long. Now, in 2013, 3 years after the film's release, and a year after the release of the third film, Fred reveals that Judy has actually become an alcoholic stripper, presumably because of a traumatic experience with her relationships with Fred and Kevin. It is not said whether Judy has turned her life around after these events, or even Fred, or Kevin for that matter, but we may never know until we hear from Fred again. Now allow me to take the time to reference some other films here. Fred the movie, like any great work, takes inspiration or makes allusions to other works.
If you're going to dig a hole in your backyard, this is actually very realistic. It's so
This is
hard.
verite. I went for a Godard approach on the tunnel.
A confirmed example by director Clay Weiner himself is Harmony Korine's Gummo, as seen in the bathtub scene where Fred has bacon duct taped to the wall, of course alluding to the infamous scene in Gummo. Now, while most people think the references to Gummo stop there, I actually think it goes way deeper. First off, let's take a look at the plot of Gummo. Gummo takes place in Xenia, Ohio, a Midwestern American town that had been previously struck by a devastating tornado. The loose narrative follows several main characters who find odd and destructive ways to pass time, interrupted by vignettes depicting other inhabitants of the town. If we compare that to Fred the movie, it is very similar in that Fred the movie is a depiction of a broken America, a post-9/11 America, an America devastated by the financial crisis. Now, while it is not a devastating tornado or natural disaster, it's these historical events that seem to place everyone around Fred at unease. There's a heavily unsettling and uncomfortable tone throughout the film and its characters. Everyone seems a little bit off, for lack of a better word. Now, Gummo, much like Harmony Korine's other work, is very transgressive in its style and presentation. Fred the movie can very much be described as a transgressive work. So transgressive, in fact, that it actually caused renowned film critic Mark Kermode to suffer a severe mental breakdown on air.
Along with a Serbian movie, it's my least favourite viewing experience of the year. The impression of Fred the movie is going to drive you out. I had to stay.
Indeed, the themes covered in Fred the movie are very dark. Another film we can compare Fred the movie to is Joel Schumacher's Falling Down. Falling Down follows Defense, played by Michael Douglas, a disgruntled, unemployed man who goes on violent, depraved rampages in a quest to reach his daughter for her birthday. It is essentially the story of an ordinary man who has passed the brink of no return. Now, while many people hear me talk about Falling Down, they might come to the conclusion that I will compare Fred Figglehorn to the character of Defense, but in reality, that is not necessarily the case. Sure, the two characters are comparable in that they are both on a journey to find someone they care about, all whilst their journey is blockaded by, frankly, very upsetting experiences with individuals around the town. Falling Down, however, came out in 1993, so it is a different beast altogether. Films such as Falling Down or the previously aforementioned Fight Club, while still discussed and relevant today, are very much a product of Gen X rage and the often cynical nature that came within this time frame. And it's not just film. In music, the 90s were ripe with bands often associated with the grunge movement, such as Nirvana or Alice in Chains. And not just exclusively American music, but also overseas with bands such as the Manic Street Preachers. A film like this, in 1993, one meant to appeal to a Gen X audience, works because Defense is an outlier. With few exceptions,
I'm an American. You're a sick asshole.
Defense is the most depraved character in the film. While Defense is a fundamentally broken man who has a sense of relatability to the audience and even sympathy for his perceived noble goal of wanting to attend his daughter's birthday party, as the film goes on, it feels harder and harder to root for him as he terrorizes innocent people. The world of Falling Down is full of characters that still have hope in the American dream, whereas Defense is the outlier. He has lost all hope in the American dream, and therefore seeks some sort of vengeance, if not exactly knowing why. Now, what does this have to do with Fred the movie? As I've stated before, Fred Figglehorn is not comparable to that of Defense. All the other characters surrounding him are comparable to that of Defense. Allow me to explain. Keep in mind what I just said about Falling Down, while it is indeed relevant, is very much a product of its time. It came out around the time many still believed in the American dream, or so we perceive. It is a quintessentially Gen X film. Fred the movie, which takes place almost a decade after a post-9/11 America, makes the American landscape an entirely different experience. Fred the movie takes place in an America long after Defense is considered an outlier. In a post-9/11 America affected by the financial crisis and one stricken with rising gun violence, is not the same America that was portrayed in Falling Down.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow, not so focused on OPEC. Yes, OPEC did cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day.
2010's America makes everyone Defense. A post-9/11 America where everyone is untrustworthy of their neighbor, where everyone feels like they're that close to snapping. Everywhere Fred goes, he is constantly terrorized. There are few characters in the film that are genuinely kind.
Nice hair, moron!
In 2010, Defense is no longer an outlier. He is the status quo. And Fred the movie is Cruikshank and Wiener telling the viewer that it's going to get even worse. While there are many films we can and have compared Fred the movie to, there's really no better comparison than Falling Down, or in this case, a reverse Falling Down. A reverse Falling Down in a Gen Z world. Many films can be described as cautionary tales, but through this lens, Fred the movie can be considered the single greatest cautionary tale of them all. A warning against an America that normalizes toxicity, an America that doesn't properly fund mental health, an America that leaves its young men behind, an America that tells us to fight with one another and not trust our neighbor, an America overrun by late-stage capitalism.
$795? That's how much my mom makes a year. That is ridiculous.
Never mind, Lorenzo. He's broke.
Package of 6, how much? $1.12. Oh! Too much.
An America where they keep you unhappy. The kicker is, the film came out 15 years ago, yet we didn't seem to listen to what it was trying to tell us.
This could be the most serious recession in decades. And that means life, as most Americans know it, is about to change. In some cases,
Speaking of late-stage capitalism, this video is sponsored by Cash Pool. Whoops, there's a little typo in pool there. With Cash Pool, you can make bets and win all the big bucks. Want to bet on your favorite sports team? Cash Pool's got you covered. Want to rekindle an addiction to distract from the fact that your family's in crippling debt and your children are starting to look like they're from Grave of the Fireflies? Honey, I can't! I'm leaving! Our children are fucking dying! And you don't care! Cash Pool is there for you. Looking for a good time after losing your dearly beloved wife? Yeah, hi, I would like one thigh job, please. Alright, anything to drink? Golden shower, please. Alright, that's kinky, so it's gonna be extra. Oh, no worry. I can bet on Cash Pool. Fuck. Cash Pool. Destroy your life in the press of a button. Now, I want to return to the scene of Evan Weiss in the woods. Now, in this scene, we are meant to think that as the viewer, little Evan Weiss is still alive, further bringing back Fred's childhood trauma. Now, while there are many moments in the film which we can easily write off as just a figment of Fred's imagination, such as Fred's dad or Derf, this scene, however, is a little more difficult to decipher. How do we know if Evan Weiss is truly there? How do we know he's just not another hallucination from Fred's fragmented mental state? One way we can look at this scene is that Evan Weiss truly died on the day he got lost in the woods, and his body was never actually found. Fred knows this, but he tries to bury it in the deepest, darkest corners of his mind. Fred finally facing his fears and walking through the woods is his way of coping with the grisly death of his childhood best friend, deciding that this moment in his life will not define him. His mind finds new ways to play tricks on him instead, yet in a more comforting, if surrealistic way, such as his duet with the deer, a scene which is widely interpreted as Fred scholars to be another hallucination of his. Soon after their duet, the deer quickly disappears, once again implying that this is all in Fred's head, and his delusions can just fade in and out of time and space like that. The deer is no longer there to comfort him in his mind. Instead, he is greeted with the smudged, aged appearance of Evan Weiss. Again, if we take this interpretation that Evan Weiss was not actually there, rather another one of Fred's delusions, this scene could be considered symbolic in how one suffering from childhood trauma struggles to escape it. Fred convinced himself that he could go into the woods without being reminded of this traumatic incident, but his mind is so fragmented throughout the film that it will continue to play tricks on him. It will continue to show him this horrific imagery, if not the dead corpse of his best friend, then a reminder that he left his friend in the woods for years on end, only now coming out to greet him with an uneasy smile, letting him know, "This is what you did to me." This leads Fred to scream, but not scream just because of the scary nature of the imagery itself, but rather what it all means. These are not screams of surface-level terror. These are screams of guilt. The moment he thinks he can forget what happened to Evan Weiss on that day, it comes back in his mind and reminds him. He screams and runs out of the woods, but he's not necessarily running from a physical interpretation of Evan Weiss. He is running from his past. Another way we can look at this scene is if Evan Weiss is a stand-in for Fred himself. Let's take a look back at Derf. Derf works as a stand-in for Fred also, but he's what Fred wants to be. He's what Fred hopes to achieve in coolness, in style, in charisma, and most importantly, in attitude. Now, it is confirmed that Evan Weiss was indeed a real person, as confirmed by the police officer at the dam.
Except for what happened to little Evan Weiss.
But this specific interpretation of Weiss, this aged, scraggly hair version, could be representative of what Fred fears in himself. After all, they have pretty similar appearances and clothing. This version of Evan Weiss that Fred runs into in the woods is the opposite of what Fred sees in Derf, whereas in Derf, he sees the ultimate achievement in charisma and letting go of his insecurities. This horrific Evan Weiss is what he sees in himself if he gives in to his delusions. While Fred is highly delusional, there could be a part of Fred's brain that knows this. While he never explicitly states it in the film, and most people interpret Fred as a fully delusional character, there could be a small part of himself where he knows his delusions, and he's scared of what it turns him into. And to me, there is no better scene that represents this part of Fred, this self-aware part of Fred, than this. If we look at the film this way, then his screams soon take on a different meaning. Fred's disturbed mental state are not necessarily the cause of his frequent screams. He screams because of his disturbed mental state. He's screaming in the woods because he knows his delusions will only bring him back his childhood trauma and is a glimpse of what he can become. He screams after calling a Latino man a spaceman because he just realized how racist what he just said was, realizing it wasn't actually him and not something he would go around saying, but his mental state keeps playing tricks on him, causing him to scream this way. Now, there are exceptions to this. His scream after Judy moves away is widely interpreted as a scream of delusion, not necessarily a self-aware scream. But while we can dissect every single scream in the film and decide which scream is self-aware and which scream is just another part of his delusion, I feel like that would be quite counterintuitive to the filmmaker's part. I feel like the viewer is supposed to make this distinction themselves. Yet with all these layers, it's no wonder why the woods scene in Fred the movie has gone down as one of the most disturbing scenes in modern cinema. Now, after the incident in the woods, we come across quite possibly the most important scene of them all. After running out the woods, Fred sets up a little tent for himself at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, Derf shows up, and Fred asks him to wake him up as he is going to sleep. Fred is quote-unquote woken up by Derf, but as the viewer knows, Derf is not there. He is a figment of Fred's imagination. Therefore, he cannot wake up Fred, meaning this entire chunk of the film is an elongated dream sequence, the most extended one, and what so happens to be the most important scene in the film. Fred gets on the bus and sees a woman holding a stray puppy, or as Fred would call it, a squirrel. She offers the puppy to the passengers on board, but there are no takers. It isn't until she comes across Fred, which the mere sight of this animal causes Fred to be ecstatic. Now, this woman only shows up in this one short scene, but like many of the characters in Fred's dream sequences, I think she symbolizes something deeper. This woman is symbolic of a godlike entity, or reminiscent of a guardian angel. Remember when I compared this film to Falling Down, how I stated that there are few truly kind characters in the film. The only exceptions seem to be Bertha and Judy. This woman is another exception, but she is not real. Yet another character Fred comes up with in his mind to comfort himself. However, this is not merely a Fred Figglehorn daydream like we've seen. This is a full deep sleep dream. And if we go along with the belief that our dreams mean something, this woman handing Fred the squirrel seems to be a gift from God, a sign from the heavens above to tell Fred to keep going, despite how horrific his journey has been. After acquiring the squirrel, the bus stops and Fred finally arrives at Judy's house. We then cut to a miserable-looking Judy, who states that she hates it here and she wants to move back to her old house, confirmed to be a reference to Cinderella.
Was this supposed to kind of be like Cinderella, like she's being forced to clean and stuff?
Yeah, it was.
That was the idea.
And then Fred finally arrives. Keep in mind how Fred showed up to Judy's house in this dream sequence. He shows up out of nowhere, but Judy appears to be happy with this. Within this dream sequence, we get to see Fred's distorted sense of reality even more. His stalker behavior is not only justifiable to him, he doesn't seem to have a problem with it at all, which heavily implies that Fred is morally stunted in some way. Fred having a lack of morals or not understanding ethics and morals could have to do with his backstory that I brought up. His neglective mother and his abusive grandmother. He grew up without a guardian to teach him right from wrong. Fred then hands the squirrel to Judy, symbolically giving up his gift from God and giving it to Judy.
Squirrel! I love squirrels.
We then cut to them at the fireplace, and Fred tells Judy all about his journey. Fred seems to think that telling Judy about all these details will make him seem more manly or impressive. As I've said, Fred is very much impacted by toxic masculinity and its consequences. After telling Judy about his journey, they proceed to finally sing, something Fred has always wanted to do with Judy, and they hum Do Re Mi as the house slowly burns down. Fred then wakes up, the bus finally arrives to Judy's house for real, and is relentlessly bullied by the guest at Judy's party, in what I can only describe as one of the most nightmarishly stomach-churning scenes I've ever seen. To the point where scenes from the film Martyrs are easier to watch. Kevin slams a pizza on Fred's shirt, Fred vomits on Judy, and leaves. Judy runs out for Fred, but it is too late. He has already taken the bus back home, in a very depressing, silent, profound sequence. He finally arrives home and has a mental breakdown. The dream sequence with Fred and Judy is the most important scene in the film because it signifies Fred's perfect world. And right after that scene, we see the sick, twisted reality of it all. That life sucks, and nearly everyone in the film sucks. Fred, walking into Judy's party uninvited, will never fail to make me squirm in my seat, as it is the ultimate portrayal of mob mentality. Now let's go back to the dream sequence. The dream sequence was actually inspired by Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy.
This section of the movie was completely inspired by The King of Comedy. And there's a whole thing in that movie where you're not sure what's fantasy and what's reality at some point in the movie. And that's kind of what the inspiration of this part of the movie is that you think it's real and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, is this fantasy? Because we've set up so many fantasies, and now we're really paying it off, I think, in a great way, especially leading up to the party.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to go over this film during the cinema portion of this video, but I felt it would be most appropriate here. The King of Comedy stars Robert De Niro as Rupert Pumpkin, who is a wannabe stand-up comedian who desires fame, to the point where it turns him highly delusional. It is very similar to Fred in that it is often hard to tell for the viewer what is fiction and what is reality. Very much like Fred, Pumpkin desires to be an extremely funny stand-up comedian, whereas Fred aspires to be a talented singer. Rupert Pumpkin's desire for fame is so intense that it leads him to threaten the life of a late-night TV host, played by Jerry Lewis. In Fred the movie, Kevin can be Fred's stand-in for the TV host Jerry Langford. Now, unlike Jerry Langford, Kevin is not famous or successful. However, Fred sees Kevin as such, not knowing how truly insecure Kevin is. Fred sees Kevin as his ultimate roadblock in getting anywhere in life, in stealing Judy and accomplishing his goal of singing with Judy. Fred and Kevin are both envious characters, but employ a rather destructive form of envy. as the philosopher Nietzsche would put it. You see, Nietzsche saw envy as one of the most important human emotions, and while he condemned the outright rejection of it, he warned that it is often used in a less than constructive manner. Now, we definitely see this with the character of Kevin, but we especially see it with Fred. Fred is a character entirely driven by that of envy, and this entire scene perfectly encapsulates this. The many dream sequences in the film are what Fred envies and what he desires. He desires a deep relationship with Judy, and near the end of the dream sequence, as the house slowly burns down, it's his way of saying, "Till death do us part," that nothing will separate you and I, even in death. Alas, we get to the ending. After the incident at Judy's party, Kevin decides to upload the video to YouTube under the username KevSmellMyFart. Seeking vengeance, Fred decides to start his own party. The only kicker is, nobody is invited. He makes specific invitation cards to disinvite everybody that he knows, or everybody in the neighborhood. After non-inviting everybody, he comes across Bertha, who he also disinvites at first. But upon realizing that Bertha was also not invited to Judy's party, Fred gives her a chance, and they pull off the most insane party in cinematic history, in one of the most infamous scenes in the entire film. After their epic party, for a lack of a better word, Fred posts the video of the party, and now everyone seems to be jealous of Fred. He is now the talk of the town.
I wanted to make it to Fred's party, but my girl didn't want to go. I like the party. She don't like the party. I like to break it down.
And the very final scene shows Fred and Judy ready to start a relationship. Seems like a happy ending, right? Everyone loves Fred, but here's the kicker. Does anyone truly like Fred? You see, when I say that, I mean, does anyone truly like Fred for who he is? And how much of this can we take for certain? The scenes at the school the night after are pretty easy to interpret as real, as Fred is not there and most of his dream sequences focus on him, as Fred seems to possess some sort of narcissistic personality disorder. But what about the final shot of the film? Was Judy truly there? Sure, we can see Kevin in the background, but as we've seen before, Fred and Kevin can both be intertwined into Fred's fantasies. When I look at this scene, I am very much reminded of another Martin Scorsese film, this time not The King of Comedy, but Taxi Driver. Spoilers for Taxi Driver if you've never seen it. Taxi Driver is another Martin Scorsese film that stars Robert De Niro as the character Travis Bickle, who becomes increasingly isolated and mentally disturbed, kind of like Fred. Also like in Fred the movie, Travis has a love interest that he's become infatuated with, Betsy, played by Sybil Shepherd. While things start off smoothly, Travis's lack of self-awareness starts to put off Betsy really quickly, and they don't see each other again. Around the city, Travis encounters Iris, played by Jodie Foster, who is a child prostitute, whom Travis attempts to persuade her out of this. At the end of the film, Travis visits the brothel where Iris works, and murders everyone there in a grisly shootout except for Iris. After the shootout, he is then caught by police, and we the viewer think this is truly the end for Travis Bickle. But as it turns out, things go rather well for him in the end. Or so we perceive. He is not prosecuted, rather hailed a heroic vigilante by the press and the entire town. Now, while Travis and Fred's actions are nowhere near comparable here, what is comparable is the very final shot, where Betsy, Sybil Shepherd's character, shows up yet again. Because of his newfound fame as a vigilante, Betsy seems to have a newfound respect for Travis. Unlike in Fred the movie, however, it is not confirmed whether or not Travis actually starts a relationship with Betsy after all this time. But it shows how word of mouth has improved the reputations of these main characters for their love interests. And while they seem like happy endings for these characters, there's still a sense of tragedy to it all. having somewhat of a feeling of an empty victory for them. We've compared Fred the movie to a lot of other films with these, for a lack of a better phrasing, layered characters as far as morality goes. While many of these characters seem to have good intentions at the start of the film, their mental stability slowly withers away. But the ending of Taxi Driver, specifically its feeling of an empty victory for Travis, applies so well here it is hard to explain. The montage of everyone loving Fred after this party truly exposes the superficiality of American culture. Think about it closely. What do we as a society admire in other human beings? Is it a sense of respect, kindness, caring for other human beings? Fred the movie argues that while we may claim to admire these things as individuals, a sense of mob mentality rushes over us. As soon as we group, we all seem to worship at the altar of superficial things, whether that be popularity or fame, money and power.
I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much.
Or as the kids would put it, aura. Success when it comes to dating. Or as the kids would put it in this case, riz. Why do we both admire and resent those who we deem to be powerful? Those who we deem to be important? And most importantly, what even deems those labeled important in the first place?
To me, that's so realistic that teenagers will lie to cover.
And it's so easy for like something to switch as a trend. Like Fred was just not cool, but then like a day later, like if like the coolest person acts like he is, then everyone does.
And if there's just this feeling that you were left out of something and that everybody else was a part of it, that thing was cool.
Yeah.
With this scene, Fred the movie is directly attacking you, the viewer, portraying America's citizens as inherently vapid individuals who, ironically, lack any sort of individualism or any sort of values that aren't directly tied to making them seem more impressive to those around them. We, as a culture, have decided to worship those for having a bigger bank account than us, for having more name recognition than us, for their attractiveness and being plastered everywhere. But why? Is this really what we want to focus on? And how can we as a culture shift past this? Well, Fred the movie tells us that it's not really something that's going to go away anytime soon. While it's not fair to call the movie inherently nihilistic and devoid of hope, the film employs a deeply cynical outlook on human nature. The reason why this feels like an empty victory for Fred is because his newfound fame is built on a lie. Okay, not entirely a lie, but a half-truth. You see, at the party, Fred set up a bunch of mannequins to make it look like more people were there than actually attended. This falsification of the party leaves everyone else at the school to falsify their experience as well, with ones claiming that they even attended Fred's party and hurled with Fred.
And we hurled together.
Before the party, no one could care less about Fred. He was seen as a pariah. He was one of the only students to not get invited to Judy's party. But after this video, everyone wants a piece of Fred, and therefore falsifies their reason for not attending his party. The entire ending is built on a web of lies. Sure, Judy and Fred may have started a relationship, but at what cost? The relationship didn't last very long because it was built on a lie.
With this very final scene, Fred the movie argues that sincerity is dead. His entire persona, his popularity, everything is built on a lie. It's all performative. Everything. That's what the film is trying to argue. Kevin's popularity is performative, the same way Fred's popularity is performative, the same way Judy's popularity is performative. Fred would have never been accepted if he didn't lie about throwing that party and pretending to be something he isn't, and in essence argues every living creature is destined for failure, and the thing that keeps us socially accepted is rejecting your true identity, and how in the end, rejecting the deeper parts of yourself just to be accepted isn't worth it. And that is why Fred the movie is the most depressing film ever made. Because at the end of the day, we all have a little bit of Figglehorn in us. We are him. We are Derf. We are Judy. We are Kevin. We are Fred.
Kevin bites hard, and ambitions are low, and resentment rides high. Where did Judy go? Well, Judy moved away. I'm headed for the road. But Fred will tear us apart. Kevin, Fred will tear us apart. Kevin. How did the cheese get so hot? Microwaved on my fries. Stay away from the woods, or you'll end up like Kevin Weiss. I'm gonna throw a party, but you don't get an invite. But Fred will tear us apart. Kevin, Fred will tear us apart. Kevin. Judy's exposed. There's a taste in my mouth as my obsession takes hold. Will you remember my name? It's Fred Field.